Okay, guys, bang, bang, bang. This is Alternative Data News. I'm Aubrey Hodges. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Alternative Data News. I'm super excited today to have my guest with me. He's doing some incredible things in the alternative data space, really sort of driving the industry forward from a pioneer perspective. John Farrall from 90 West Data. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Aubrey. Thanks for doing this, and I'm glad to be here.
Sure, absolutely. So before we kind of kick things off and kind of go through 90 West Data, thought it would be helpful maybe just to sort of get the backdrop on you and, how you got involved in alternative data and, how was the pivot from what you were doing earlier?
Yeah, great. So my partner, Pat Hearns, and I started 90 West about 18 months ago, right at the tail end of 2019. Both he and I are, traditional sell-side equity research people. So Pat, for 20 plus years, has been on the traditional sell side. Most recently, he was at a firm called Longbow Research, where he was one of the early partners there, and he was the director of research. So he managed a pretty decent sized research staff producing product for institutional investors. I was at a firm called Cleveland Research, where I'd been since we started that firm in 2006. And again, Cleveland Research is a traditional sell side equity research firm, really focused on grassroots, ground up, fundamental research, do a lot of surveys, a lot of channel checks, and they have a really good reputation in that space. What Pat and I both knew and noticed in the space was our customers were asking more and more about, in addition to or in place of some of the traditional research services, what are we doing with data and delivering data, and so that was getting a lot more attention. I went to a couple of the big trade shows in the industries just to kind of see what was going on and get the lay of the land. This is back in probably 2016, 2017, and then kind of a long story short, Pat and I collaborated, got our hands on a unique panel of U.S. consumer transaction data, and officially launched 90 West at the tail end of 2019, and have been really focused on getting that product into the market and learning as much as we can about the process, and just getting 90 West off the ground.
Yeah, no, absolutely, fantastic story, and it's remarkable, to hear about some of the progress that you guys, have made in such a short period of time. Kind of want to take a step back. Obviously, in our industry, most people are familiar with consumer transaction data. But how would you describe sort of the usage cases for consumer transaction data? When a client comes to you, and I presume your clients are on the investment management side, as my clients are, what's the purpose behind them wanting to understand and leverage, consumer transactional data, and what's the utility there that helps them identify a signal and sort of tie things back to either the macro story or a bottoms up story?
Yeah. So with consumer transaction data has been around in the alternative data world. It's been around as long as just about anything. The consumer transaction data, again, is credit and debit card transaction data. So think anytime a consumer would swipe a card at a retailer, online, with an Uber, whatever it might be, that gets recorded, and in our case, we aggregate that data at a merchant level and deliver it. So from a investment management perspective, there's a lot of use cases for this type of data. From a macro perspective, if you get a big enough grouping of people, you can get some really good insights into broad macro consumer health, big picture trends about online versus offline spending. There's a lot of big picture cases, and then as you drill down, you can get into merchant specific insights, so you can get a sense of what's going on with whether it be sales trends or average ticket or the number of transactions at different retailers or merchants. You can get a really good read onto what's happening, what's changing, a test thesis you might have about demographic changes, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty robust, uh, uh, there's a pretty robust use cases for this kind of data. Um, and that's just scratching the surface. When you start talking about augmenting other data sets with consumer transaction data or vice versa, you can really start getting into more detail about consumer trends and consumer behaviors and how it's changing. And for example, through the pandemic, there's a lot of things that changed. Are people going to go back to the way they spent prior to the pandemic, or are these new habits kind of going to stick? So that's what people are watching for now, it seems.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine that that type of visibility through a period like we experienced with the pandemic on a real time basis is enormously insightful and helpful to be able to monitor, track, and kind of understand like how and where the pendulum is swinging, month by month, right? Which would drastically change. Um, who are some of the types of clients that you're working with? I can imagine that folks on the investment management side come to mind, but within that sort of segment, you certainly have hedge funds, and then within hedge funds you've got discretionary long short, systematic, and you have perhaps private equity. On the opposite spectrum of where the industry is going, you also have corporates emerging. So can you kind of just touch base on the types of clients that you're working with over at 90 West?
Yeah. So given our background from the financial services space, we are most comfortable working with the institutional investment space. There is a huge opportunity within private equity. There's a huge opportunity within corporates. We are just scratching the surface there at 90 West. We're just figuring that market out. But from a institutional investment space, the way I think we think about it is, there's 25 or 50, investment firms that are very data savvy and have, call them systematic, call them quant, call them, the big platform firms that have a lot of internal data science resources. And that is a different kind of a sale, where they typically are very savvy with their use of data, and they'll say, get me the data set clean, complete, consistent, and we'll take it from there largely. There's a long tail of institutional investment firms that might understand or do understand why consumer transaction data, for example, might be useful to them or insightful for them as they make decisions about buying and selling stocks, but they don't necessarily have the data science resources internally to manage that. So that's a little bit of a different product that you need to get in their hands, a little bit more productized type offering as opposed to just raw data. So that's how we think about that market. Now the corporate market, where we've started to dip our toe in a little bit, there's different use cases. They obviously don't care about stock prices and tickers and quarterly earnings as much or at all relative to the institutional investment space. They care, it seems, in my early experience here, trying to get a sense of what's going on with consumer health, consumer behavior, our
Sure.
trends changing. Our data set allows us to get insights into demographic, so age group, changes by age group, changes by zip code, that sort of thing. So we the use cases are a little bit more, they're different use cases, and it's a bit more of a consultative, if that's the word, consultative sale, it seems, at this point in time. So we're learning a bunch about how to approach that market, and think we have a really good product for that market, and are excited about continuing to grow there.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think the corporate space is an intriguing area. And interestingly enough, I think the corporate space is being shaped and molded by a number of the guys on the street that you and I work with, whether it be the analysts, the portfolio managers, moving or transitioning from the buy side, which we've seen, over into sort of tech consumer facing, companies, DoorDash, Ubers and Lyft. And so that grows not only the usage cases, but the fluency of people that sit in those seats as well.
Mhm.
So that's it's a pretty intriguing shift that I think is happening and will continue to occur.
Yeah,
Um,
well, a good example of that, if I can jump in, my old firm, a plug for them, Cleveland Research. had a very good reputation as and has a very good reputation as a traditional sell side equity research firm. And as they did their work, they started they call it the Cleveland Research Market Research business. So that was more geared towards corporates. So there is a market for, they just had to, again, it's a similar kind of a thing. The corporate customer doesn't care about, buying and selling stocks, but they are very interested in the insights you get, which aren't that different from the insights you're providing to institutional investors. So the crossover market is there for this kind of information. And Cleveland Research has proven that over the past, they've been doing that for 5 or 10 years now. So there's definitely the market there. You just have to repackage it a little bit away from the stock specific stuff and more towards it seems the consumer behavior type stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's important KPIs and things to better understand in terms of retail habits and trends. Want to quickly segue into sort of getting your thoughts on the overall industry. Like as you kind of think through alternative data and how the industry has evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. What are your general thoughts on where we were 3 or 4 years ago and kind of where we are today?
Yeah, it's high growth. There's a lot of changes going on. There seems to be more venture capital money flowing into the space at various levels. So I think people are starting to catch on to the opportunity that exists. I do think it's very early innings. You've seen in really the 3 or 4 or 5 years I've been paying closer attention to the space, a tremendous number of data vendors come to the market. People who say, I have an interesting data set. What we've learned is it's not that easy. It's not that easy to the compliance piece of it is a big deal when you're dealing
Sure.
with these heavily regulated institutional investment firms that not everybody has a full appreciation of until they kind of dig in a little deeper. There's limited resources on the buy
Yeah.
side. Even if you have a really interesting data set that can add a lot of value, there's only so many data scientists on the buy side that have you got to get in line. And that's
Yeah.
that long sales cycle probably has been my number one surprise from when we started the firm, 12, 18 months ago, is just how long the sales cycle is for some of this stuff. So that's the number of data vendors growing has been interesting. And I think the acceptance and the understanding or the appreciation for the value of this data from the buy side has increased. It used to be, this is just for systematic quants, math guys, and they have a black box. And what I think there's a greater appreciation for the fact that while there is a use case for that, and that was the original use case, there's a really nice use case for, call it fundamental investors, call it longer term investors. This is
Sure.
not just about calling the quarter on a stock. This is about understanding the investment position you've taken, having all the resources that are available to you to have a really good view as to what's going on with, it could be a 3 to 5 to 7 year time horizon, but you need to be paying attention to what's going on a day-to-day basis with some of these companies and industries. And so I think there's a great, a lot more vendors, a greater appreciation for the value. And I think one of the things that's going to happen over the next few years is that connection is going to happen, because it's really complex right now to get 1,000 data sets and figure out where the value is and how do you even use it? How do you even begin if you're on the buy side?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you mentioned some really great, points there, specifically around, limitations. Limitations, time, sales cycle, regardless of the level of access or relationships that you may have, even at a specific fund. There's still a process in how they prioritize data, and that priority can change on the dime, right? I mean, it could change literally from week to week in terms of what happens in the markets, where their attention's at, how they're focused on the construction of the portfolio, and then more importantly, what they're willing to pay for the data. I think there's a large perception that because the clients that we work with manage billions of dollars of AUM, that they have unlimited research budgets, which tends to not be the case.
Mhm.
We're kind of in an environment where performance is getting harder, for funds to generate alpha. You also mentioned supply. Supply coming online certainly creates more value and a better understanding of the data, but it also means there's a large bottleneck in how funds can actually go about back testing enough data, who they
Mhm.
prioritize, which contributes to the overall long duration of these sales cycles, which at a bare minimum, I think people should expect, in some cases, 9 to 12 months, 15 to 18 months as well. So it's a very interesting sort of inflection point that we're at. As you think about new vendors coming to the space, growing, it seems like there are 15 to 20 new vendors that I uncover every week just through personal relationships. What do you think that does for the industry in this type of environment? Do you think it's a net value contribution to alternative data, or does it go in the opposite way where we start to see a large number of consolidation, because not everyone can win and not everyone will be able to obtain the clients that they need for their business to continue to mature and grow.
Yeah. I think it offers some validation that there's value in the space. People wouldn't be entering at the rate they're entering if there wasn't something of value to be added. So that's a positive. It does add a lot of noise, with regards to the amount of people who think it's going to be simply them calling up a big systematic hedge fund. The systematic hedge fund is going to write them a big check and just say, "Give me the data, and we'll do everything else." It's not quite how it works. Uh, there's a lot of noise. I would think there's going to be some consolidation. Uh, I think one of the things that people are learning, where maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it was the firms that had access to a single data set that nobody else had access to, or could understand how to use that single data set, could get an edge. Now it seems, for the big popular data sets, everybody has access. So the
Sure.
next edge is, I'm going to take these 3 or 4 or 5 different data sets, mix them together in a very proprietary way to generate a signal that is unique and proprietary to me. And so I think that's where we are. So that would lead to, you'd think, some consolidation among data vendors potentially, or saying, 2 data vendors will get together to augment their offering, because 1 plus 1 could equal 3 in certain cases. I don't know exactly how that plays out, but it would make sense. And then at the same time, the other side of the market is, and we've talked about this a little bit, but the broadening of the market. It isn't just the big systematic hedge funds anymore. It's every fund that is serious about you know, uh, positioning themselves well going forward has to at least be understanding what's going on in the alternative data space. And then again, private equity, venture capital, corporates, these guys are all very interested. And I would say, a couple, they're certainly behind the learning curve relative to some of the institutional investment firms, for public equities. And that didn't even get into the government use cases and all different kinds of things. So very early innings from a demand standpoint. I think the supply is going to change and evolve over time. It offers big opportunities if you have a good product and a good offering, and you know what you're doing. And lots of really exciting things can be happening over the next couple of years for sure.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, given your experience, having worked on the street, I want to flip the scenario a little bit. If you were running, let's just say, a $1 billion discretionary fund, and you were trying to generate alpha over the next year, what data sets, would you prioritize, in addition to leveraging, 90 West and the consumer transactional data that you guys have?
Well, first I would engage with 90 West immediately. I think you have
Sure.
to do it. But I that's a tough one to answer, because I'm very familiar with consumer transaction data, my data set in particular. But I have not, frankly, had a lot of access to some of these others. Um, I would say it likely makes sense, kind of going back to that 1+1 = 3. I think
Sure.
if you were to mix together and combine, app data, satellite data, some of this NLP data is really amazing, of the things they're doing in that space, the web scraping stuff. So I would think if you could do it, and that's not to say it's easy to do, uh, but if you could pull together the data science resources to generate a proprietary signal based on that, I think that's not only would it be a good way to look, but again, it's proprietary, and it probably has a little bit longer, the alpha decay would come slower than if you're just simply looking at a single data set that eventually everybody else is going to get their hands on. If you have, the same 5 data sets as somebody across the street, and you mix them together in a different way, a proprietary way, that generates some alpha, that's that's a lot more difficult to copy and to, figure out what's going on and where they're generating. So the sustainability of that alpha generation could potentially be have a little more staying power potentially than just a single data set. Um, but again, if I was running a $1 billion fund, I would definitely be paying attention to what's going on in the alternative data space, because I do think you need to have a foot in that space if you're going to be competing, over the next 3 to 5 years for sure.
Sure. No, absolutely. And so, what I want to try to sort of better understand is you know at 90 West, certainly with the consumer transactional data that you guys have, can you just talk me through like what makes the product so unique, and how are you guys thinking about how the product will evolve over the next 2 or 3 years? Do you think it'll always be a raw data set offering, or are there any ongoing conversations internally to evolve the product to other ways to provide insights, transparency, etc.?
Mhm. So we have a data set today that we work with. Obviously, every day the history gets longer, and I think every additional day of history it creates a better, more. It improves the data. You have more history is better. So that's one way it just will naturally improve. The way we have our arrangement structure with our data partner is call it 6 months, we bring on another panel, and that will continue to grow the panel over the course of time, and so that will help us improve. That'll grow the data set. So regarding the evolution of the product, that is something we work on. So every Friday we send around an email to a large number of people that just kind of shows basically some slides and some charts and some tables of interesting things that we're able to pull out of our data. We're working on kind of that phase 2 of our business, which is again moving from we're just going to provide a data feed basically to a sophisticated hedge fund, into how do we approach those non-data savvy firms who have interest in what our data is saying. How do we deliver that data to them? And we're still figuring out the best way to approach that, but there's a huge opportunity there, because again, most of these firms don't have the internal data science teams that you need to process multiple data sets on a daily basis. That's just not something that's gonna be in the near future. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that, and think there's a pretty big opportunity as we continue to kind of grow there.
That's pretty exciting. Can't wait to see how the product evolves over time. Want to kind of segue into, obviously, I've kind of said this before, but on other episodes, but I feel like working on the street is similar to attending a small liberal arts college, right? It's like everyone kind of knows each other or has seen one another in passing, or is a small 1 degree of separation away from one another. As you've been in the industry, specifically within alternative data, who are some people that have come to mind that you've had conversations with or have done work with directly, that you admire, or kind of really respect some of the things that they're doing to move the industry forward?
Well, you are like, is it the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation? You have 2 degrees of separation from everybody on Wall Street, probably, Aubrey. So you're one of the guys, and I'm glad you're doing this podcast. And I think these types of things help kind of bring the industry forward and kind of make it more broadly accepted, and gives people kind of a peek into what's really going on. I think that's really helpful to do things like this. So I'm glad you're doing that. One of the things I've really enjoyed about this business and this industry is because it's so high growth. It's every day it's evolving rapidly. Everybody, competitors or potential customers or potential vendors, everybody seems to be very willing to talk and help and have conversations about where they think things are going. And that's been a really refreshing, kind of fun thing that I've noticed about this industry, that I'm really happy to be a part of it. If you spend time on LinkedIn, unfortunately in the last year plus, we haven't had an opportunity to do Eagle Alpha live conferences or new data conferences or Battlefin conferences, which were
Sure.
fun events that brought everybody in the industry together. So I'm hopeful, and they have done a good job of doing those virtually. And there's a Clubhouse event on Wednesday mornings, 10 o'clock Eastern time, that Mark Fleming Williams kind of heads up, and it's a kind of an open forum for the alternative data space. He's a guy who does a podcast as well, and does this Clubhouse event, and has written some articles that has really kind of become more of a voice in the space too, and that's been great to see. But it's fun on those Clubhouse events is a good example where people of all areas in the space, competitors, potential customers, what have you, get together and have an open conversation about what's happening, whether it be a recent fundraise or a recent product launch or some other news in the space. So that's been kind of fun to participate in each week for the past. It's probably been going on for a couple months now. So it's been a lot of fun to get to know people, and I look forward to having an opportunity to get together face to face, whether it's New York or Miami or London or wherever it winds up being, the first one to really open the doors and have a live conference again.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because prior to kind of coming on here, I just got an email from Todd, over at Battlefin this morning. Dropped me a note just saying, "Hey, Aubrey, we're super excited. We're going to be kicking off live events again. Looks like first event is going to be what I think is one of their staple events, which is the Miami event, January of next year. So it looks like all that's in motion, and it's pretty. It'll be pretty exciting to kind of see people out again and have those conversations. Doing it virtually has been interesting as well, but the live events really do create tremendous amount of value and kind of bring everyone in the industry together, which is good to see.
Yeah, and that is a great event that they put together in Miami, and it's a good time of year to be in Miami for sure.
Absolutely. I want to kind of lastly just ask you about 90 West, and where you kind of see your business and the company over the next 5 years. Like, if you could sort of look into the future, your glass ball, how do you think the company will evolve and unfold?
I think we're going to continue to improve the product and be really focused there, and continue to add on and as we get more history, as we add to the number of people on the panel and continue to be really focused on providing our clients a clean, complete, consistent data set that they can trust, that they can have high confidence in engaging with. I think that's going to be a real focus, and it'll continue to be a focus for us, because one of the things I learned on the traditional sell side is it's really important to earn that trust. And the client you're dealing with is taking career risk. If they make a bad stock call a couple times in a row, like, that's career risk on their part. So they need to know what you're doing is like I said, consistent, clean, and you earn that trust by doing it consistently day after day after day over a long period of time. And so
Correct.
that's really our focus now. As far as the evolution of the market, we're going to keep our head up. And one thing I can guarantee is it's going to shift and change. And whether that means continuing this go direct sales uh, uh, strategy that we have, that's what we're focused on right now. And just really going to stay focused on being a great partner to the guys we're engaged with now. And if you do that, earn trust, good people will find you. And we look forward to that happening.
Absolutely. Trust is critical in this business. And I think a lot of people, shy away from, times and opportunities where their data may not be clean. But you have to understand that, it's important to help your clients, your prospects, business partners understand, where you might over index and where you might under index. And that level of transparency is what's going to, build, that business relationship. I mean, because as you said, there's an enormous amount of career risk, for an analyst or PM, ingesting, any new data set into their existing process.
Yeah. And this is, you need to acknowledge this is complicated stuff. None of these enormous data sets are completely 100% perfect. What is key is, we know our data set better than anyone. We need to point out to them where the holes are, where the anomalies are. Don't let them find it and have to ask you the question when it's something you're already aware of. And if you can point that out, say, listen, this is a really good data set we have. That doesn't mean it's perfect. There are holes here, there are holes there, but we've identified them, we've pointed them out, and we're going to, beat you to the question, and then do that on a regular basis as you deliver the stuff every day. If something happens and something doesn't go right, tell them before they ask. And so that's all part of that earning trust and being a really good partner to these folks over the long haul, and that's our goal.
That's fantastic. John, I want to sort of shift gears a little bit. Let's kind of talk some shop, a little bit. I mean, you're currently based in Ohio. What's that experience been like when you've got, King LeBron James lacing them up, night in and night out, throwing up the chalk, game by game. What was that experience like? And have you seen him play in person? And what were your thoughts and what was your experience like?
Well, that's cool. It was a lot of fun. So we're based in Cleveland, Ohio, Northeast Ohio. I've been here my whole life. It was fun. I mean, he's great. What's interesting was when he was a freshman in high school. So whenever that was, 2000, 2001, he was in the papers, and you're like, who is this guy? Who's getting all this ink? But the fact that you've seen him, and he's been obviously a very public figure through the last 20 years. To see that has been kind of cool. Again, I'm a fan. I don't, I don't know him or know any of those guys, but it's been fun to watch. It brought a lot of attention to our city. The championship in 2016 was a big deal for the people here, just because it's been kind of a long time for any Cleveland sports team to win anything. But it's cool. It's cool to kind of see that even from kind of afar. And I have seen a number of Cavs games. I was a big fan when he was here, continue to be a big fan, although it's kind of more difficult to root for the guys because they're it's been a rough couple of years since he left. But it's fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just go through this, as every desk does, every locker room, every sports desk, in 5 or 10 years when people are talking about, who's the GOAT, in your opinion, who's that going to be? Is it Michael Jordan, or will it
No,
be
no, no,
James?
no, no. It'll be LeBron. And I think, and I'm obviously not objective, but objectively, what he'll have over anybody else is the longevity. And he's been doing this for 17 years. I mean, I don't know the exact, I mean, I think he's been in, the finals 10 of the last 11 years. I saw a stat that he had, 25 plus point average seasons. He's like 16 of them, and the next guy's got 12. So, it'll be the longevity thing that I think puts him over the edge. And yeah, it'll be. I think there won't be any question. Certainly not from Northeast Ohio.
For sure, for sure. He says he wants to play until Bronny gets into the league. What do you think that'll be like?
Well, if anybody could do it, he could do it, and he could probably have enough power to position himself so that they could be on the same team. Let's just hope it's the Cavs.
I, I was just I was just going to say that, there could be a homecoming, back to Cleveland, Ohio, with LBJ coming back, and Bronny kind of entering the league. That would be pretty interesting. I don't know who would be in charge of throwing the chalk up into the air. Would LeBron pass the torch over to Bronny? But that would be a pretty sweet ending to the
I
story.
I also think that his son is going to have enough pressure, and his dad might say, "I may just not play this up too much." Although it would be fun for the two of them, but coming into the league, that young man will have, if he does it. I mean, that's no slam dunk, but if he does it, he'll have a big mark on his back. Everybody will want to come get him. So yeah, it'll be fun. That would be great. That would be a lot of fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned a couple things earlier around, the ability to travel and so forth. In your experience, what's your favorite city in the world, and why?
Uh, I live in Cleveland. I've lived in the Cleveland area my entire life. I love it here. There's a reason I live here and choose to live here. And I'm raising my kids here and all that. But I have, being in this business for the last 20 years, spent a ton of time in New York. I was in New York, two times a month at least for basically my entire career, and love it there. It's great. I have not been there since March of last year, and I'm very curious because when you went there after 9/11, which was obviously a major event, that that was a time that everybody was drawn together, and
Sure.
you look around when you're walking down the street and people kind of nod, and like it drew the community together. And my fear, again, not having been back to Manhattan in 15 months, the COVID thing kind of pushed people away and made people not want to engage and interact and go to places. Is that going to have a different kind of effect? New York's going to be just fine. uh, it's just going to be a different kind of a recovery than it was 20 years ago. And who knows, maybe the 9/11 20-year anniversary memorial that's going to happen this September, maybe that's a big event where we kind of put down the masks and say we're back to normal, or whatever needs to be communicated. So the timing of that might be kind of interesting. We'll see. It'll be an
Yeah,
interesting next 6 months for sure.
absolutely, absolutely. In your mind, who do you think is a better CEO for shareholder value, Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk?
Bezos has been amazing. If you just look at the way he's taken every expense item on his P&L and turned it into a profit center, it's amazing how he's done that, and he's created a lot of value. And you know, people, if you look at the stock chart, they were not, there was no guarantee they were going to make it through that first dip in 02, 03. I want to say the market cap got down, sub billion for sure. And so even after he was the quote unquote successful IPO of a venture backed company in 98 or 99, whenever that happened, there was no guarantee that they were going to be what they are today. And so he and the team over there is really cool, but just to see what they've done on the transportation side, the cloud side, turning expenses into profit centers is really kind of cool. And I think that's one of the more interesting, neat things that company's done.
For sure. Yeah. And, look, I mean, he was an early pioneer of leveraging and utilizing data, right? I mean, he's got a background having worked on the street at one of the largest firms. And so, he certainly saw and understood the utility and the value of, understanding the data and consumer, retail behavior trends as well. Lastly, just to kind of segue off, best piece of advice you would give anyone looking to, work in the industry or build their fluency, across alternative data?
Well, if you want to get, I have people, again, coming from the Midwest who will say, I want to go to New York and be on Wall Street coming out of college or what have you. And I would say, first of all, you got to love stocks and love the business, because if you don't love it, it's a grind. It can be a grind, and you're going to be competing against people who love this stuff and
Exactly.
follow this stuff the same way. It sounds like you follow the NBA. Like, they love this stuff, and if you don't have that character trait, or you don't enjoy this, then it's going to be a tough gig. Then the next thing I would say is, this is, 20, 25 years ago, this was about running, looking at the balance sheet and the income statement and running DCFs or whatever financial analysis might look like. And while you still need to understand that stuff, and have a good sense of, being able to read a balance sheet and all that sort of thing, have a broader skill set, understand how to code a little bit, understand, how, compounding of the, data and social networks work, things of that nature. And having, I think Scott Adams, who's the Dilbert guy,
Sure.
he phrases it, you have a talent stack. So you're not the best at anything, but you're in the top 10 or 20% in the world at 3 or 4 different things. And that mixture of things can really set you apart. So, in his case, he would say, I'm not a great cartoonist, but I'm a pretty good cartoonist. And I'm not real funny, but I'm kind of funny. I'm not real, good writer, but I'm kind of a good writer. But if I put those 3 things together, I'm the best, guy to ever do Dilbert comic strip. And if you can kind of think along those lines as you manage your career and say, I'm going to, take 2 or 3 of these different talents and try to really build on them in a way that creates a unique combination that is different than anybody else and adds value in a way that nobody else can add value, you'll find a spot and somebody will want you. And, that's the kind of thing. And I have an 18-year-old son now who's going, just graduated from high school. So we've started to have those kinds of conversations, real high level, about how you build a career, how you manage a career, how you start a career. And so it's hard, but if you enjoy it, and I've enjoyed what I'm doing, and I enjoy doing this kind of thing, that goes a long way towards having a fulfilling career, for sure.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, John, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you down in Miami at the Battlefield event. And we're going to have to do this again at some point in the future as well.
I really appreciate what you're doing broadly for the industry, and I appreciate you including me in one of your first podcasts. So I thank you very much.
I appreciate it, John. Thanks.
Talk to you later.
Okay, bye. Hey guys, if you found this episode helpful, useful, and you enjoyed the content, make sure to follow us on all the appropriate channels, subscribe to the cast, and leave a positive review. It really helps us continue to grow. put out amazing content, and it helps other people in the industry, find the platform and the channel as well, so that we can continue to grow and keep putting out, fresh related news and content every day. Until the next time, this is ADN, providing alternative data news always, in all ways.